Absolutely. Hi, I'm Scott Greenwald. I'm a final year PhD student in fluid interfaces, and I'm going to talk today about about some work that I've done in AR for education. My current work, which is new and which I won't be able to talk about yet, is on VR for education, learning physics and things like that. So if you're interested in that, please approach me afterward. So the kind of setting that I work in is real-time communication for learning. So this is, you see on the left, you see an expert who has a video feed of the learner on the right who is facing something looking through Google Cardboard. And so in this case, what this does is it allows the teacher to see exactly what the learner sees and therefore give relevant information. Send markers and things. So you can see live here that the expert is going to do things like send markers and ask the learner to back up and get a different perspective. And so this is a beginning effort to get into what I call Beyond Being There, which is a reference to a paper from 1992 by Jim Holland and Scott Stornetta. And the idea is that with the mediation of communication technology, you can actually communicate in ways that are not possible, go beyond what you can do face-to-face. And so that'll be very relevant. This connection between the learning technologies I've worked on and sort of the learning mission of documentary is what I'll sort of push forward here. So I'll first go deeper into this idea of exploratory learning with virtual companions. And so I deliberately chose the term virtual to refer to either a person or an agent, an AI. And then next I'll sort of put forth this proposal, which is kind of a taxonomy that I think will be really helpful in summarizing and getting an overview of what some of the other panelists have talked about, as well as the other presenters. So. And this is going to be called Live Storytelling for Virtually There documentary. So, so this concept I call EVA, exploratory learning with virtual companions, is about going beyond being there. The full name of the concept is exploratory learning with virtual companions sharing attention and context. So if we break this down into its component pieces, you've got exploratory learning, which means the learner is in control. You have telepresence, which means the teacher can interact with the environment as well as the learner. And attention and context awareness means that the teacher can see both the context around as well as how the learner is reacting, what they're paying attention to, and possibly also physiological signals like eye tracking and EEG. So my first exploration of this idea was a language learning system that would proactively offer photo flashcards to someone learning a language. So they would go out, they would feel like they're just going about their day, and they would have these vocabulary words appear in their Google Glass. And so this was quite an interesting concept. It worked well, but it also seemed like you had this remote person who has to participate in the process of getting this information. So that's me, and I'm live annotating photos coming from this Google Glass device. And it was pretty laborious, and also it felt like it felt like I was being underutilized, right? I could talk, I could explain, and instead I was kind of locked behind this little box, and all I could do was write words on cropped images. And so the next project was an effort to go deeper into some more interesting and nuanced content, which was learning about artwork. And so we learned about artwork, or the participants learned about artwork by being on a real-time phone call, but also sharing this visual information. So they had a common visual reference point, which were these images from Google Glass, and they would talk about that. And so just one quote, and the takeaway here is actually that you need to be careful about the level, deliberate about the level of presence that you choose for your system. So it says, this person is comparing a face-to-face condition, which we did, with a Google Glass condition. So we want to know, how do these differ? And he said, in the Google Glass condition, I felt a little more like I was watching TV with the glass on, drowning into this painting while she's talking. But there, in person, it felt more like I was trying to entertain, hold a conversation, smile, get a laugh out of you. This was a joint interview. And so the interesting part about this was he was learning more in the Google Glass condition because he could forget about all the social implications of sort of learning from a person face to face. So this is kind of interesting. Keep that in mind. So then the next thing I tried was actually elevating this level of presence even further. So the Google Glass system was based on still images, and this was based on video streaming. So I see exactly what you see through your Google Cardboard because you're seeing it through the camera and I'm seeing it through the camera too. And you could send markers et cetera, and you saw that. So just a quote, a result, a takeaway from that was that it just says that this concept was really successful. It felt like they were there with me, and et cetera. So it definitely felt like there was someone along with me there. While I was watching, I knew that there wasn't anyone there, but just the fact that they could see what I was seeing was really helpful in answering my questions and also getting the actual tour guide experience rather than just a voice through a microphone. And so the idea here was just that, so first of all, observe that the user was active. In the previous setting, the user was a little more passive, and he liked being passive, like it was like watching TV. But in this case, it's like they're answering my questions. They're coming along, they're answering my questions. I'm in control. And so, okay, so what I want to do now is let's segue into part 2. So the idea is like, what can we take away from this and think about the future of documentary? So I'm calling it the virtually there documentary. This is live storytelling. And so so this is just this is kind of a basic definition that just sidesteps all of the complex issues that everyone's talked about in terms of presence. It just says it's kind of a world and you're kind of there, and it gives the viewer some autonomy. So actually it's most closely related probably to the kinematic concept that Noni presented. So of course, documentarians must be concerned they lose control of the story. So how are they going to control the story if the user explores autonomously? I'm going to skip this because of the limited time, but essentially I just wanted to briefly argue that there's always this problem of oh, I lose control of the story when we go to a new medium, and then you have to find a new way to control the story. So essentially, I'm going to propose that you tell the story by using a virtual tour guide. So you have a real person there in this exploratory space that somehow is going to guide you through it. So the virtual tour guide is a person or interactive system that provides guidance and information in exploring and becoming acquainted with an environment. And so as a documentarian, I imagine 3 questions would come to mind, 3 important questions. 1, what is the nature of this world? 2, what is the nature of this tour guide? And number 3, does the visitor leave a trace, which is sort of the question of like what is the nature of the visitor essentially. And I'm using the term visitor because I think it's better than viewer or anything else in this case. So we've heard. We've heard a lot of different takes on this. I think this is going to be a useful taxonomy that comes out of this. Firstly, the nature of the world. So. One kind of world is a recorded world. So this is the kinematic VR. We just record everything, and then afterward you can explore it. Secondly, though, it could be live, right? So you could be in another place that you can walk around through just a live stitching technology, and that'd be a very different kind of documentary because you're actually there, and depending on what kind of interaction you can have, you can really interact with some people. And like sort of relating this to the mission of the documentarian, you would then be actually bringing people together as a form of education rather than just providing sort of a dead document. And finally, the simulation. So we've seen a lot of this kind of stuff that involves simulation. It's based on the real world, but we can explore alternate realities or create this personalized version. And next, finally, the idea of like what is the nature. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So now, what is the nature of the tour guide? So there's kind of 3 kinds: people, recordings, and artificial agents. I'm going to talk about a couple different kinds of people. So first could be a regular tour guide, like you know from a museum, someone who's like kind of informed and kind of professional, so semi. And then secondly could be an authentic person who has something to do with the context that's being documented. So that would be essentially someone from the context. Thirdly, it could be a documentarian, so someone who has a vision for what message you're supposed to get out of this. It could be someone they train or something like that. Or it could actually just be someone just like you who doesn't really know much more than you do. Someone who's experiencing it with you. And then it could be, so now moving on to like the pre-recorded guide, it could be pre-recorded and it could have some branching depending on what you look at, but it's very basic, or it could actually be very intelligent, react to you in a variety of sophisticated ways. And finally, category number 3, does the visitor leave a trace? So what kind of trace could the visitor leave? Well, it could be like essentially the way that one visitor reacts to the documentary could impact the recommendations that are made to future visitors. So this would be the classic idea of collaborative filtering. Essentially, I recommend things to you based on similar people. The second thing could be, it could be someone that experiences the documentary with you in some fashion. It could be synchronous or asynchronous, right? So it could be someone that's like really there at the same time, or you could see like an avatar or some kind of shadow or recording of someone who viewed it before. And finally, this could be an environment that is collaboratively modified, so that they're kind of like if someone graffitis on the wall and you go after them, then you see the graffiti on the wall. And so just to review this kind of design space for guided virtually there documentary, the world could be recorded, live, or simulated. The tour guide could be recorded, artificial, or human. And the visitor could be a collaborative filter, someone who's co-present with you, or someone who co-creates the environment. So the conclusion is that sort of inspired by my experience with experiential learning with virtual companions, I propose this design space of guided, virtually there documentary, incorporating a real-time tour guide. So that is it.